Well, hey guys, so today we're going to talk a bit about how we use keyframes in the effects controls panel in order to animate different objects. We can do this in any number of ways. We can use this for any number of applications. We could create animated films in their own right, or short animated bits. We could also animate sort of entrances to sort of on-screen graphics, so we can add different effects to our file to our footage itself, just by virtue of changing certain aspects. And we can talk about what we can put on there and what we can animate in effect like this. So let's go ahead and open up a new project here, and we'll call it Keyframe Basics, and just go ahead and press OK. And the first thing we want to do is we want to just put like a background on this, because right now we don't have anything going on with the sequence. So go ahead and click on this little button that says New Item in your. I'm using the editing, and if you want to see what I'm looking at, you can click this little box here and just say Reset to Save Layout, and it'll bring it back to this little layout here. But let's go find on your import sort of project file little box down here, and find this little New Item thing. It looks like a piece of paper with a corner folded up. And let's just find where it says Color Matte. And with Color Matte, it should give you the option of making it 1920 by 1080, and that's fine, because what we want to do is we want to have this be like an HD video. Press OK, and just pick a color. Try to pick one that's more in the center, not one that's kind of towards the edge here. You don't want to have it too terribly bright. We just want it to kind of be, and let's try to avoid green too. So I'll choose this sort of like light blue color, sort of grayish blue color here. And I'll just press OK. And let's just call it background. And we'll just click and we'll drag it in. And so now we have this blue background. Now you should have downloaded this sort of simplified version of the ACE logo, the ACE coat of arms here. So let's just go ahead and drag that into our Premiere project. And let's just drag it inside our color matte here. And it's not perfectly centered. If you were to say, for instance, view this whole thing like it's supposed to have something at the top and at the bottom. So if I were to go over here, if I were to double click on it, you can see that it extends out. It's a perfect square, but the bottom and the top aren't quite lined up. So let's go ahead and shrink it down some to where it fits sort of at the center, right about there, and that'll kind of what we do here. So as far as what keyframes are essentially just moments in the timeline where you tell Premiere where you want your item, your element of your thing to be, right? And the other frames are then filled in by virtue of Premiere's sort of internal mechanisms. It's internal software. So if I were to say, for instance, this is about 3. Let's go ahead and select both of these clips, and let's extend it out to about 10 seconds in length here. So I'll just move this out to over just about 10 seconds. And let's click off of them and just click on our ACE coat of arms layer here. And I'll go over here to Effect Controls, and we can look over here at these various items. If you don't see any of these, just make sure that you push this little button next to Motion, this little arrow that points down, and that way you can kind of reveal all the different things you've got. There's several different things we can put on here. But what we'll do is let's extend out. Let's move in the timeline. Let's move our marker to about 3 seconds in, and this will be precisely where we want all of our stuff to kind of come into existence here. So let's start by using our position. So our position essentially is marked out by where the center of the item is. It's marked out by where the what we'll call the anchor point is. So if I were to sort of double click on this and maybe zoom in some to about, say, 400%, you can see this little target right here. That's the anchor point. So if I were to, say, for instance, click and drag on this, this is our position right now. This is the very center, 96540. This is the X position, the Y position. If I were to click on this and sort of move it off to the side, you would see that changes, right? Control Z, that'll change back. So if ever you reach for this and you click on the center and you move this, that'll change where your anchor point is, and you want to make sure that you're not going to grab that by accident. So I'll just change this back to fit. And so essentially what we want to do is we want this to end up here at about 3 seconds. So we're just going to go over here to our effect controls and find this little stopwatch here, which is going to toggle our animation. And as soon as we do this, it's going to create a little keyframe right there. So with that done, let's move off to the very beginning of the timeline. And because we have this stopwatch lit up, any change we make to the position, now the other items won't necessarily be affected, but any change we make to its position is going to create a new keyframe. And I'll just double click on this, and let's just move it off to the side. In fact, I'm going to zoom out to maybe 25% so I can see the edges. So I'm just going to move it straight off to the side, going towards the left here. Right? Easy enough, right? And so you see over here, we have a new keyframe. And I'll just press the play button here and just sort of see what that looks like. All right, it kind of moves in just like that. That's fantastic. All right, so with that being said, we can have it move from one side to the other. We can have it move in any direction we want. But we can also apply other effects to it. So let's go ahead and get to the 3 second mark where we were before. And if we want to jump to it, we can go over to our effect controls panel and we can press this little arrow key that will go to the next keyframe. So this is where the next keyframe is. So I'm going to do the same thing to scale. And now in this case, if I press this little animation here, I'll make a little keyframe next to scale. And right now the scale for mine is set to 51.5. That's about half the size it was before, so it'll fit inside the frame just because it's such a big file. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing I did before. I'll just mouse over to the end, and I'll change the scale from 51. I'll just go ahead and change it over here. I'll click on there, and I'll press 0. And I'll press Enter. And so now it's going to go from almost nothing to about half the size it was. So let's see what happens when it comes in. All right, now it's sort of getting bigger as it comes in. Right? Okay, so the same thing can be said for basically any of these other things. So if I were to go for instance over here to rotation, and once again, see, I've once again hit this little arrow here to go to the keyframe. I'll click rotation, and I'll click the little stopwatch there, which will light up my keyframes, and I'll go to the beginning. And what I'll do is I'll have it start rotated, say, 3 times. So I'll click on this, and I'll press 3x. That's 3 times, and so it'll have me 3 times 0. And so as it comes in, it should be rotating. Right, and there it is. It comes in, right? So we can see that we can have it set to be 0 degrees, and then just obviously have it rotate backwards. Now, if for instance I wanted to reverse that, if for instance, so watch how it's spinning. It's spinning in this case counterclockwise. If I wanted to have it spin clockwise, what I could do is I could actually just change this keyframe to 3 times, and I could change the previous keyframe to 0, and now it'll spin clockwise, as you can see right there. So anytime you have it moving towards the end of the circle, you can see. So if you were to say, for instance, click through here, watch the rotation as you sort of mouse through. See, it goes forward 12 degrees each time each keyframe until it gets to about 360 here. Once it gets to 360, it starts over at 0, but then it goes to 1. So we've rotated 1 time, so on and so forth. All right, so this is the idea is that it sort of fills in all the various different things here. All right, so as far as anchor point goes, if I were to move the anchor point here, let's go ahead and go to our keyframe right here. If I were to move the anchor point slightly, what would happen is it would actually change the way it moves, and it would change the way it rotates because, like I said, the position is based on the anchor point. So if I move the anchor point, then the position of this little coat of arms is going to change as well. So let's go ahead and light up the anchor point right there, and what we'll do is we'll go back to the beginning and we'll make a new keyframe. What we'll do is we'll actually move the anchor point slightly. We'll move it slightly down. So this right here is our keyframe for this is our Y position here. So we'll move it down, say, to about 400. Let's see what happens to it when it comes in. All right. So as you can see, it's rotating on a slightly different axis. Essentially, when you move the anchor point, it just changes the sort of central focal point where all the rotation and all the movement goes. And we'll go ahead and leave anti-flicker filter alone for now because the precise, like, kind of, the precise use of that is not something we're kind of getting into right now. The last thing we'll talk about is opacity. Opacity here is simply the how much it blocks the light. So with the same keyframe selected, we'll just click on our stopwatch here next to opacity. We'll actually click a little so because the opacity is actually already lit up. We'll just click this little add remove keyframe button in the middle here, and it'll add a keyframe there. And once again, I'll go to the beginning. And I'll just change this from 100 to 0, and this will have it fade in. It'll go from 0 opacity to it fades in like that. Okay. All right. So as you can see, basically any bit that's on the on the effect control, right, can be affected with your keyframes. But this also applies to things like your color, or like different effects you apply. So let's go ahead and go to our effects panel. So let's go down here to our basic, our little keyframe project bin, and let's click on effects. And let's find video effects. And let's go down here to, say, for instance, transform. And let's go to blur. We'll go to blur and sharpen. So under video effects, let's go to blur and sharpen. And let's find Gaussian blur. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pull Gaussian blur into our file right there, which you'll see it doesn't do anything right off the back, but you do see this little Gaussian blur thing kind of pop up here. So let's make sure that we're on the right keyframe, we're on the right section here, and we'll light up our blurriness stopwatch under Gaussian. If you don't see that, you can click the button there. We'll light that stopwatch up, and we'll just go back to the beginning, and we'll just have it blur from, say, 50 pixels, as it were. So that'll make it quite blurry. And maybe we can see the effect here. Not quite. How about we go back to the beginning? Let's change it up to, say, 100. Oops. Let's go to the previous keyframe and change that to 100. Let's see how this looks. There we go. You can kind of see it fitting. Let me zoom into about fit here, so maybe we can see that effect a bit better. One more time. Yeah, you can see it kind of like coming into focus as it comes in. Now, if, for instance, we wanted to, say, have our blur last a little longer, we could actually move this keyframe. Each of these keyframes we can kind of move to, say, for instance, pull this over here, and I can just grab this, and I can just move this slightly over to the side here, maybe up until about 4 seconds instead of 3 seconds. And then what we can do is we can just pull this in, and we can see it comes in, it's still blurry, and then it comes into focus at about 4 seconds in. And then just what I want to do here is I'll just do that. So basically, just if you let's save this. Let's go ahead and put our name next to it. And what we want to
came in a little later. I just want you to know the internet is down. We're working to get it back up. We know the internet's down.
All right. So let's go ahead and make a little text box here. And let's just put our name in the corner here, and we'll just click right there, and put your name on this just to make sure I know it's you. And change the font to something other than Minion Pro. Change it to something, say for instance, a little more bold here. Let's see if we can. Once again, double click on the text. And let's change the font. I'm going to change mine to no movement, and that'll give us this little. I'll change it to white as well. There it is, white. Okay, good. So once again, we have it spitting in and coming to fruition right about there. So that is the basics of our animation with keyframes. Let's go ahead and extend this out to the very end, and we'll just have this be 10 seconds in length. All right, so go ahead and let's export this. Make sure that your background is selected here. Let's go to File. Let's go to Export. Let's go to Media, and what we'll do is we will choose just choose the AVI and then choose the match source. Call it something different. Call it keyframe basics last name, and save it and export it. All right, well, very good. So cannot wait to see you guys produce, and I will see you in class.